special guest speaker today is Sarina. So as you know, the Flag Design Forum is a place where the flag design enthusiasts can come together. We usually comment on flag design projects in development, give feedback, help to revise them. This time we decided to add a case study of a flag design project that's already finished to completion successfully, so we can learn about the development process of that as a way to guide us and help us to learn about the flag design process. So over to you, Sarina.
Brian, Ted, thanks so much for having me today. Well, I'll just kind of start. I was kind of invited to come last minute. So I took some old presentations that we used when we were talking to the governor, the lieutenant governor at the House and Senate when we were talking about the flag design. So I'll kind of go over a little bit of the story. Part of what I'll talk about is the messaging for the flag process. We went through a process where we needed to have House and Senate votes to get the flag through. And so it was kind of different than what Minnesota is currently doing, where they have a commission and their committee will create the flag and it will just pass through when they've decided the end. So a lot of the design was led and maybe influenced too by the feelings that were happening within the House and Senate, but also within the community, of course, because that's who we're designing the flag for, really. So when we were approached to start the new flag design, my department, the Department of Cultural and Community Engagement, I was really excited to take on the task. We thought it was going to be really fun. And you know what it was, looking back, but for about a year of our lives, it was really stressful. I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of really great designers and a lot of really wonderful people. Ted has been with us throughout the whole process. Thank goodness for him, because he kept us on our feet when we thought, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? And I'll even say some of our admin departments still have PTSD from some of the situations that we've been in. But in the end, we have a beautiful flag design, very excited for it. And the story of how we got there is really interesting because, and I'll share my screen now, we started with a public process where we had submissions of over 5,000 designs. And of course, we went out to the public and we put in a public engagement process and we said, here's what makes a good design, and here's why our flag is lacking that really good design. We look like all the others. We heard the SOB word. And so we want to be something that's really unique to our state, that really stands out. And we gave them all the same lip service. You know, it's not lip service, but we've said all the same things that I'm sure a lot of us are saying today. We want to represent who we are now. The flag is due for a redesign so that it looks more in line with the other really great flags within our country or within our world. And so we kind of went down this process. And here's our very first original flag. And just a really short history that I have learned throughout this process. The very first Utah flag happened in 1942 or 3. Ted, if you know the history, please chime in. But it was in the early 40s when Utah wasn't quite a union in the United States, and Utah really wanted to be a state. And so there was a union festival where all these territories would come together and talk about who they are and show off their animals and their craft and different things within the celebration. And so quickly the Utah governor said, build us a flag, and this is the flag. So this is the very first flag for Utah that was created by the Daughters of Pioneers, kind of put together really quickly to show, oh, it's 1847 actually. So this must have been when the celebration happened. So the flag was never really a process for the people. It was never really voted in. It was just kind of adopted. And over time, it took on some different iterations. And I don't see the current, here we go. So here's the Utah flag before the new redesign. It's very difficult to know all of the symbols on here. Children can't say what it is. And the Senator McKay that I had the pleasure of working with throughout this process would trick people and say, how many seagulls are on the flag? And people would think, and then they would provide an answer, but there are no seagulls on the flag. So it just kind of proves that it's hard to remember what there is, but there's a lot of rich history behind how this flag got here. And so Utahns are very proud of this flag. So it was a public process where we had people bring us their designs. And also in this process, we had people fill out surveys and tell us what are values to Utahns. Is it the landscape? Is it family? Is it the beehive and industry, which is our motto? And so we got all of these different comments from people. We had over 5,000 designs, 5,700 something, I think. and about 4,000 comments. And so it was my job as leader of the design for this task to bring it all down. Thankfully, Ted was with us, and thankfully there was an admin team that was all working together. So the way that we decided to do this was to put it all up on a wall gallery style. So we commissioned some professional designers to be in this mix, and then we had a lot of different public designs be submitted here too. I'll note that there was a flag design program that was created by a civilian. It was called the Utah Flag Generator. And so a lot of designs kind of came out of that. But although some of us designers were like, hey, that's cheating, but what it did do is tell us what some people's values are, which were beehives and colors and the way that the rectangle would divide up. And so they were very valid when it came to looking at all of these different works that we got in. And this included children's design too. We worked with different schools around the state to have districts bring us their children's design. I'll show you one or two of my favorite. And at the end of my presentation, I'll give you a link. We have just recently, last week, digitized every single design that we received. So you can scroll through those at your leisure. And it includes a lot of really cute kid designs. So throughout this process, we would gather a huge team. We had a lot of different committees that were public outreach committees, but this, when it came to the design, it really came down to the design review committee, which included Ted. It included historians, it included commercial graphic designers, artists, native designers, myself, and let's see, I'm missing somebody. I said historians. It was like a mix of different people who knew what they were looking at when they were looking at the design. We had people thinking about how does the balance and the color work? And then we had people thinking about, is this really what we want to say on our flag? And so it was a really beautiful team of people that worked really well together. And we had a lot of really great conversations over the course of many in-person meetings. So we went through all of this process. We had stickers. We put stickers on the flags that we liked. The ones that didn't have stickers went away, and it narrowed down and narrowed down and narrowed down until finally we put the flags into groups. And so the designs sort of became, here's our beehive group, here's our arches group, here's our stars, our hexagons. And like we had all of these different groups, maybe 15 to 20 different groups. And then we would narrow it down more even within these groups. So I'll say the symbolism in the flag design is very important because you see things that are on the nose that Utahns can identify with right away, like a beehive. But what's important and why I really appreciated having this design review committee be so diverse is that there were concepts in these flag designs that weren't obvious at first, and they needed a little bit of explaining. So fortunately, through this process, we were able to gravitate to a flag and talk about why this is a strong flag, not just that it's divided in 3 sections with horizontal lines, but because it meant those are the way that the Utah Basin divides the state. And there are a lot of really thoughtful and cerebral ways that designers were thinking about the flag that were not obvious right away to some of the people working with us. And so I found it so helpful that we had these conversations and cookies because it just diffused everyone to have cookies and drinks. So it was a really wonderful time. And it included our design review committee plus Representative Handy, Senator McKay, and then we'll invite the governor in and Lieutenant Governor in to come and talk about some of these pieces. What I think is really great is that when we first started, when we had thousands of designs on the wall, people would say, oh, these are my few favorite, these are the ones. But then they would completely change their mind as the refinement process happened. So we would take these groups of flags, and then professional designers, including myself, would divide them up. And then we would refine the very best within these different subgroups and present them back. And let's see if I can show you this. So these are sort of the subgroups of the design process. So we had our mountains and our beehives and all of these different little things. This one felt very native. And so we had our native designer group working on this. And so all of these subgroups began to turn out even more designs. So we went from thousands of designs to 100 designs to hundreds of designs, and then back down again to our top 20. But what was important too is that we never said to the public, the best one wins. We always said we're looking for ideas because we are going to build the perfect flag that represents Utahns. And so we always made it about that iterative process where you would take all of these different designs, talk about them, change them up, combine symbols and concepts to create something that really represented Utahns. We had hundreds. This is just some of the few that went through to the end. Okay, I'm going to show you some of my favorites. You probably have all heard about the gun-toting bass and the skiing velociraptor, but this kind of sums up all of Utah in a really fun way. I think we're also really just kind of fun traditional people too, and we like our snow. And so this is one of those fun designs. This one, I couldn't find the one that has earned the nickname Beelian, but there is a bee alien combo looking creature that was a child's design that was really cute, that just kind of became a design that just hung around our office. I wish we would have framed it now. And then we had a lot of different designs where the creatures looked kind of angry, you know, like here comes this really angry seagull flying through the air. But we had some cute things happening too. So this was also a fun process. Okay. So from those thousands to 120 to a few subgroups, these are the final 20 semifinalists. And you can probably see the influence that came through to our final flag now, which I have next to me. But the flag was never in one of these final designs. But what we did was kind of take these last 20 and then put them back out to the public and get comment. It was, again, never a vote, never ranking. It was more of these designs. Does this one represent Utah? What's missing from this design? Is there something about this design that bothers you? What might that be? And so we heard a lot of different things about this. And to get to these 20 designs, I worked with a group of 3 professional designers. One was a professor, Gareth Fry, and then 2 were commercial artists, Tyler Sloan from Rumor Advertising and Ben Barnes, who does the work for the Jazz. And I'll tell you, it's different working with graphic designers and commercial graphic designers than it would be with vexillographers, because, and it kind of came out in the background, we would sometimes work after hours, 4 hours over the course of a couple of weeks to get down to this. And when I said it went from 120-ish to a couple hundred more, it's because commercial designers are used to doing that iterative process to see what's working, what's not, and then they present to their clients, and then their clients will choose something out of these hundreds. I think a process that I wish had been a little bit stronger was saying, pull out the greatest symbols and the greatest concepts in these pieces and just show a few. We finally got there, but it took a long time to realize that that's what we're trying to do, not to create a bunch of options, but really to create the best flag. And so from these flags, you can see here, I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but in the top right, and then 2 down is sort of a crossroads idea. Utah's a little bit out there in the West, surrounded by a lot of desert and a lot of empty land. And so it's considered the crossroads of the West. We've heard this in some literature happening within our state, and some things that senators and elected officials might say is that Utah is the crossroads from the East to the West. And so that concept is here in the flag, but perhaps visually it doesn't feel quite right. We have our state's flower, of course, the sago lily. We have in the middle column here, 2 down, is the ring of stars. That represents the 8 tribal nations. Each star represents one of the 8 nations. But what we found over conversations is that even though there are 8 federally recognized tribes, there are a lot of different indigenous people who don't think of themselves as part of one of those tribes. And at the same time, conversations were happening around a tribe wanting to split into perhaps 2. And so we quickly went away from the idea of 8 stars representing tribes, because we just don't know what the future holds. And we really want this flag to be something that lasts for a very long time. And so we played with ideas of a single star and maybe 8 points representing tribes. And then what you don't see here is the 1 star that finally represents our statehood on the final design, which I'll show you then too. Okay, so of the designs, when we went through the public process, I've circled here the ones that were most beloved, the ones that felt like most represented Utahns, these are the ones that had the greatest positive impact with the public process. And even from these, you can probably see our new state flag forming here. There's a lot of ideas. So it's also important to note that during this time in history, when we were thinking about these finalist designs, we started hearing a lot of opposition. Don't change our flag. Our flag is full of rich pioneer history. You can't remove that from our flag. And so the message kind of turned from Utah could use a new state flag that has the same meaning and symbolism to replace our flag. And it has become Utah will now create a flag for the people that resides or lives in hand in hand or in conversation with the now historic flag. So you could fly either one. And with that in mind, we thought, well, some of these, like the blue one with the circle and the beehive, or the blue with the stars around it, really are a simplification of the now historical flag, and it would not be a good companion flag. So those went away. And so now we're left with a mountain range feeling, a beehive in the center, and then the northern Utah, southern Utah feeling going on with the mountains and the stripe along the bottom, meaning southern Utah and our red rocks. And so those went through some iterations. And you can see we're starting to look at different ways to put this flag together with our designers. So at this point, we've gone from a team of probably, I don't know, Ted, like 15 design review committee members, maybe down to the 4, me, Gareth, Tyler, and Ben being the 4 refiners, down to 2. So it's now become, and in comes Mark Brooks, who you probably have heard about being part of the state flag. So Mark Brooks and I started working on the final refinements for this flag. And Mark is a very talented designer working with another advertising agency here in Utah. And we would work together closely with McKay, but also outside of what his influence was, to take what we heard from the public, knowing our new message for a companion piece to the historical flag, and putting those together. And so these are the 2 that started to emerge. And then our messaging to the public, because we had to win over hearts and minds with this flag, our messaging to the public became, but hey, look at all these flags that were submitted to us that look so much like what our final flag is turning out to be. There were hundreds of flag designs where the fields were split in 3, where there was something in the charge, and it was always a beehive. And so looking back, hindsight's always 2020. So we're looking back at all these thousands of submissions, and we're like, it's right there. The design is right there. I remember when Mark and I were ready to, we're preparing with McKay to present to the governor and the lieutenant governor to say, here's our final flag designs. Which one do you want? But then I had an epiphany. There's decision anxiety, and it is so hard for somebody in the governor's position to choose for his entire state. But having the background I have, 10 years in the advertising agency, another 10 years working for government and nonprofit and with people, I found a moment where it's like, there is one flag here, and this is the design. This is the right flag for Utah. It's not my favorite design personally, and a lot of people will say it's not the best design, but it is the right flag. It could not be more right for the state of Utah. And so in that presentation with the governor and the lieutenant governor, Mark and I sat down and with total conviction said, this is the flag. And it's this one that I'm holding right here. I'll show it to you. Oh, I might have to stand back a bit. So this is the flag that we presented to the governor and lieutenant governor. It has an 8-pointed star representing the 8 tribes, which we later decided that we need to come away from that. And once we got the governor and lieutenant governor on board, and we gave them all the reasons why, the blue field means the sky and the dark skies for Utah. The white is our snowy mountain area. Of course, the beehive for industry. The hexagon is the strongest natural forming shape in nature. And so we wanted to use that, plus it's a beehive shape. And then at the bottom, we have the Southern Utah Red Rocks. We went back and forth on colors. We didn't come to these colors until the very end, but the symbolism was all there. And we had complete buy-in, and that's when the new process of trying to win over people with this flag design began. So our messaging became, here's the symbols in the current flag, and those are the symbols that we're using in the new flag. Let's see if I can find it. Well, looks like I don't have that in here, but we use a lot of the same symbols, the stars, tribal recognition. It used to be arrows. Don't want to do that so much anymore. And then the beehive, of course. And then because the beehive in the charge was so important, we looked at dozens and dozens of different beehive style for design to make sure that we're choosing the right one. The word stately kept coming up. We don't want something that looks like a logo. We don't want something that looks like a cartoon or too simplified. We want a very stately design. So Mark and I went through over and over different beehive designs. We commissioned artists to create beehives, and not all of them were chosen in the end. In the end, it was kind of something that looked more like the commemorative flag that was designed a few years in the past, and then had a few tweaks to it to become this one that you see in the bottom right corner. And then we had to go and look at this hexagons. Like, how do we incorporate or encompass the beehive? We thought about a circle because a circle represents unity, but the hexagon really is that really strong shape. And so not only do we have a hexagon with the beehive, but the governor felt like it was a little too simplified. So we added the line that happens around it. And it's a really fancy word that I can't remember right now. What is that called?
Well, we were, if it were right at the edge, it would be a fimbriation. But
Oh,
yes.
fimbriation.
Yes.
We were obsessed with that word for a long time, but you're right, it's not on the edge. But it still provides that sense of unity, but it's a very strong shape too. And so we felt like that represented UJOB just perfectly. And it has the governor's wants. You know, it felt a little too simple. So the governor wanted to put in a little bit more pizzazz, or as Ted called it, the jewelry. So then we built out the hexagon, and then we started looking at the mountains. People would say to us, I mean, Ted sold us on the 5 principles of design. You got to keep it simple. But we kept hearing, it's too simple. Put in a line, change the mountains, put some shapes in there, make it look like what it really is. We resisted until we were finally, Mark and I said, we have to show you why it does not work. So we're going to go through the process of designing all of these different things so that you can see why the simple design is the better one. And so in the end, we went from 3 peaks on the mountain, which was one of the top 20, the top 5 of the 20 semifinalists, to 5 peaks in the mountain. And there's a really important reason why we chose to do 5 mountain peaks, because when Utah became a state in the Union, there were 5 federally recognized tribes at the time. So we decided to keep it very historic with the 5 mountain peaks. And we moved away from the tribes being in the star because we don't know what the future holds for tribal nations. And then the other reason it was so beautiful having tribes represented in the mountains is because tribal and indigenous people recognize themselves and connect themselves to the landscape and to Utah. And so we thought that was just the perfect way to show, to have honor for our tribal nations, the historic tribal nations, but also to connect them with the land. And so while it's so simple and not super obvious, it's really important in our symbolism that that's there. Okay, so now we're building out the flag. The last part we wanted was something for Southern Utah. Southern Utah gets snow, but we are so proud of how our landscapes change from Northern Utah to Southern Utah. So we definitely wanted to add something there. And so for a long time, it was just a bar, 1/3 across the bottom. But I'll give this credit to Mark Brooks. It was super smart just to put that little dip in it. So it cradles the hexagon, but it also creates a valley for what the red rocks are in Southern Utah. Beautifully smart, simple and elegant. And then finally, the star. Again, dozens of iterations. We wanted the perfect star. Is it skinny? Is it fat? Is it 8 points? Is it 5 points? Is it a full star, or is it a little like outline of a star? We looked at all of these different things so that we can say with complete certainty, this is the right one. And the reason that this one right here in the center is the right one is because it's exactly the proportions of the American flag star. And this star represents union, like when we became part of the nation as a state. And so we have a lot of strong ties in our state, very proud to be part of the US. And so there's a lot of influence in the US flag, in our Utah flag, but still keeps us very set apart, a little bit different from the rest of the nation. Okay, so more drawings of beehives. I just left them in there. Now let's talk about colors. Again, we as Utahns love being part of the nation, but also what we're hearing from the Senate and the House is that we want stronger ties to the nation's flag. And so we went with the blue, the gold, and the red, or the red, white, and blue all being the same as our United States flag. But the gold is very unique to us. And of course, that appears in the beehive and in the lines that's not the abbreviation around the hexagon. And so that became what really sets Utah apart in their flag. Now, I'll just flip through some of these iterations at the end. When we were presenting to say with certainty, this is the right flag, of course, you have to look at all kinds of things and say, these are the wrong flags. They might be really beautiful designs, but it's not right. This isn't right either. Putting it in the canton just doesn't feel good to us. We didn't love that, but we explored and we looked at Three Peaks and we did all kinds of different iterations to show why they were not correct. And I'll tell you, we spent so much time on not correct flags just so that at the end we can say, this is the correct flag. This feels right. There's something in the charge. It's got symmetry. It's the same from front to back. And it just really responded to it as Utahns. Again, exploring the mountain style, proving that it's just not right. Colors, let's look at the colors just to show that we've tried and maybe they aren't working. But here we are. So this is the final flag. Just before that little star at the end had become the 5-point star. That was sort of a last minute change based on some things that we were hearing from votes when McKay was trying to whip votes in the end. But it's a beautiful flag and I'm really super proud that I was able to be a part of it. So, okay, I will stop talking and I will let you guys ask any questions if you have them. Andrew.
I just wanted to say that on slide 7 that you showed, the second design on that, I think it looks a little bit like the flag of the Marshall Islands.
Yeah. Yeah, we heard that one. Is it this one right here?
Well, the one, yeah, the second one, the one with the star at the top to the left, and then the blue and
the blue, white, and
the red and white, like.
Yeah, this design had a lot of conversation around it. And because it does feel like it belongs to the Marshall Islands, we find out later that a lot of different flag designs had used an iteration like this. The way that this design came up is because if you look at Utah as a state, and you look at how the water flows through Utah, there are 3 geographic areas in Utah based on the basin and the way that the water works historically. And it cuts perfectly from the bottom corner of Utah up, and then the 2 and the 3 lines. And so while some will say, oh, you're plagiarizing our design, we did not do that. We came to this on our own based on the way the water historically works in Utah. And if you know about Utah, there's a lot of conversation about the water, how the water is being used, and how the water has changed over the course of history. And so that was one of the subjects that we were thinking of in creating a design like this.
I'll jump in with a comment. That's what the 5th principle of good flag, bad flag, be distinctive or be related, really connects to. And that is a flag design effort can come up with a wonderful design. But if you don't have knowledge of vexillology and what other entities may have already used that design or similar design, you might end up inadvertently coming up with something that's going to be confused. And since the US, the Marshall Islands have been in the orbit of the United States, that would not be a very good state flag because that's already taken. And Sarina's team was aware of these things and got the feedback, so they avoided that issue, even though it would have been a wonderful design.
I agree. Yeah. And so lesson learned, when you're down to your final 20 semifinalists, use the Google image search feature and check your designs. Andrew, did you have one? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I posted an image of the Marshall Islands flag in the chat.
Thank you. Okay. Phil.
Thanks for this wonderfully informative report. And in view of the thoroughness, I'm wondering if you have plans to write up your presentation in some form that will aid not only the citizens of Utah as to how the flag came to be, came to be, but for vexillographers and vexillologists in general. Do you have this, or are you worn out?
I think today probably represents the first time I have written down, and I've got all of these notes. I laid in bed the last couple of days just writing these notes, because there are so many things that happened with designers behind the scenes that the public doesn't know about. Not even my director and the senator know happen, because it's that background, like making the sausage practice, where you're iterating and you're arguing and you're pulling things together and you're eating dinner while you're on a Zoom at 9 o'clock at night. It's the really ugly parts that we haven't really talked about until today. And so I had mentioned this to my team probably 6 months ago. But I'll tell you, the 2-year-long process for this was so difficult that everyone's like, no, I do not want to do that. But I think as the flag is becoming adopted and as the opposition starts to calm down, I do think it's something that we'll want to go back to and at least create some oral histories. There is a cinematographer who created a documentary for us, Jonathan Martin, who you might know created our what is it? The
125th anniversary flag.
That's it.
Yeah.
The 125th anniversary flag. So he did a documentary on this, but I don't know that he got all of that background dirty work into that.
Well, Sarina, I wanted to make sure that once you get past the PTSD, and perhaps once you get past March of next year, when the flag officially becomes official, we have a location to share your case study, should you write one. And I'm sharing my screen right now. On the NAVA website, we have case studies in flag design, and we get feedback from other cities and states saying, we looked at this and we modeled our process on what we learned in your case studies. And so we let me extend the offer to be a place to put your case study, should you write one.
That sounds great. Thanks, Ted. Jim.
Hi. I got a couple of quick questions for you. So when the new flag becomes official next March, what status will the previous flag have? The historical flag, what will happen to that one now?
So it will become the historical flag. That will be the term that we use for it. It will be used at the state capitol when the legislation is in session. So you'll see it beginning in January and through the first couple of months. You'll also see that the historical flag make a presence on the Capitol during celebrations and formal ceremonies. That flag will be used quite often in tandem with this new flag design, but that won't happen until it officially passes in March.
Okay, but after March, so in other words, if there's a parade of states in July in Washington, D.C., for instance, the new flag would be the one that would be shown, right?
Yes, that would be the one that's shown. And again, the political process was really tricky. And so when I mentioned part of the design and messaging all shifted when we decided, or when Senator McKay decided, we need to make sure that these are companion flags so that Utahns can choose which flag to fly at any time. And so maybe we want the new design to fly more often because we feel like it's more representative of our contemporary people and who we are today. but we will not argue if any flag is flown at all to represent our state.
Had they ever thought of taking the previous flag, the historical flag, and making it into the governor's flag with 4 stars in each corner, like a lot of states do?
Yeah, that was also part of the conversation, making it the governor's flag. Because the seal is on the flag, the governor uses that seal too. And so I think the conversation shifted away from something like that. And I'm not that knowledgeable about why or what the conversation was to make that happen, but it had to do with the seal being on the historical flag and it being the same thing.
One alternative that got floated and still might happen is to make that historic flag the state's military flag. Make it the militia flag. That would be a way to keep it current and officially representing the state, but giving it a special role rather than this sort of you could fly it also role.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what Sarina is pointing out is that although the design process was rich and detailed, it's a small part of the big process, which was the politics and the public relations.
Oh, I'm sure it is. So I have one other question for you.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of confused about one thing. You said the 5 mountain peaks represent the indigenous tribes, right?
Yes.
And then the star represents the United States, Utah being one of the states of the United States. Is that correct?
So the sky is blue, and it borrows the same color from our national flag.
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the 5 mountain peaks, the white
Oh,
ones.
the mountain peaks. Yeah.
Those-
Okay. So this is one of those really sensitive things that kind of happened toward the end. Conversations were being had with our tribal nations. We had a tribal liaison work very closely and report out and get information back about how to design our flag. The tribes would say over and over, we just want some kind of recognition on that flag. This was our land first. And we absolutely agreed with that. But they did not exactly say how that would have to look. We thought an 8-pointed star would be the best way to do it. But with this talk of a federally recognized tribe dividing, then that would make it already an old flag, right? It wouldn't represent our 9 federally recognized nations. Additionally, conversations with Indigenous people who do not see themselves as part of one of the 8 federally recognized tribes did not feel like they were represented in this flag, because there's apparently, and I'm ignorant to this apparently too, but there's a lot of tension between what tribes get funding from the federal government and then what other Indigenous people do not. And we do not want to be a part of that conversation. We want to honor everyone. And so that was where our thinking started to shift. Let's turn the star into our Union star, a 5-pointed star, and let's use the mountain peaks to represent the 5 historical tribes that were present within the territory of Utah when Utah became a state.
So I have one final point to ask you. Had they ever thought of just the flag as it is, which is, I think, quite attractive, taking off the star itself and just leaving the beehive?
We thought about that. And we tried a couple of places for the star too. We had it in the sky. We did not like that it didn't feel symmetrical anymore. We tried the star above the beehive to show light shining down on us. You know, we're a very spiritual state, but that didn't feel right either. Instead, putting it below the beehive filled what felt like an empty space, so it pleased a lot of designers, but it also represented a foundation for Utah. And if Utah, the state and the nation, is represented in the beehive, that star is our Union star as our foundation for growth for Utah.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm going to go a little further and kind of be the devil's advocate. But had they ever thought of just expanding the beehive and eliminating the star?
Oh yeah, we looked at so many designs. Some beehives like filled through the bottom and then kind of filled that hexagon shape. We used circles to help enclose it so it filled the space more. But in general, no one really responded to an empty space below the hive in the shape.
My view, and I think Phil Allen has a good point. There's so many stars that are being used in flags today. My own personal opinion is it's a great flag. I think it would look better if it didn't have the star and had the beehive enlarged. but that's my view.
Yeah,
Other than that, it looks great. Okay.
thank you. We did
And
look at that.
thank you for the presentation.
Of course. Okay, Min?
I thank you very much for that very informative presentation. I'm doing a much different process due to circumstance with the municipal flags here in Nova Scotia, just trying to get the government engaged, to begin with. In some cases, I've gotten some. I really liked how you talked about the commercial designers having all those extra designs, because that's what I'm ending up doing. But I'm also learning from what you're doing, where I think in the end, I'm gonna have to assert myself a little bit more to help make the decisions. Unlike I think with some commercial work where the client is quote unquote always right. In some cases like this, it's like, well, maybe the client might not be right. Might have to convince the client on how to be right, if you will. So that was very informative for me. I think you ended up with a really great flag, and some of the questions I had with the industry have been asked and answered. I love how you went the historic way rather than trying to represent every nation and who knows about the future and such. So got a lot of really good information from that, and I just want to say thank you with some of the other questions I had already being asked.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah, I'll say working with the designers was really interesting because that's my background too. So I knew where their headspace was working with clients. You just have to keep reminding them, yes, that looks great, but is it right? Does it represent who we are? And the very best design probably isn't the most representative of your state, your country, your nation. And so it's just really important to make sure that, to me, at least, and to our team, that was in the forefront. Even if the flag design wasn't quite as good as it could be, it is right for us. Stan.
Yes, Sarina, I'll add my thanks as well. Terrific presentation, and thanks again for spending time with us. The question I have is, in your presentation, you have at the end that animated version of the flag as if it were flying. In your selection process, I know that maybe that same animation software also allows you to see what the flag looks like when it's limp on the staff, when there's no wind. Were those two images part of the decision process as to how it looks active? And
yeah, actually it was, and I'm glad you bring that up. So flagwaver.com, I think is what it's called, is what we use. But then there's other video editing tools where you can just grab it, add your flag, and then you can watch it happen. Part of the reason we liked our flag having the charge was because if it folds just right, and we were thinking, how does the flag fold? What does it look like when it falls down? You can still see those very graphic elements that kind of can tell it apart. I will say though, I was driving through my neighborhood and I saw the new flag, like limp on a pole, and it kind of looked like the French flag, the French national flag. And I thought, maybe we could have done a little something, but we wanted to keep it simple too. But you can only divide a rectangle in so many ways. But yeah, that software was part of what we used when we presented to the public. We had a very rich website that would show the flag is flat art, then we would show the flag waving, then we'd show the flag waving the other direction, and then we would show it when there's no wind.
No, that's terrific. Thank you. Folks, my apologies, but I committed to something with my family this afternoon, which is why I'm here in West Virginia, so I need to leave. Thank you again for joining in. And again, Sarina, thank you. Brian, I thank you for hosting and chairing those kinds of things. And everyone have a great end to your weekend, and please stay safe out there.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Have a good one. Go ahead, Andrew.
I just wanted to say that when Ted was showing the case studies page, I noticed that there was a report about the Utah flag from 2002.
Yes, and I'll jump in there. 20 years before Utah did its most recent effort to redesign its flag, the Salt Lake Tribune led a contest to design a new flag for the state of Utah. It didn't go anywhere because there wasn't legislative or gubernatorial support for change at the time, but it drew a large number of proposed designs, some of which got resubmitted in this round 20 years later. But NAVA members helped narrow down those designs to, I believe, 24 that were then exposed to the public through a ballot on the pages of the Salt Lake Tribune. As a fun little extra thing, I was one of the advanced judges, and so I had and kept all 1,000 submissions from the 2002 effort. And as we went through the process with Utah state flag this time around, I realized they need to go somewhere better than my attic. And so a few months ago, with the cooperation of the folks from the Utah Historical Society and the Utah State Archives, I shipped them all, and they are now in the archives of the state of Utah. So even though they didn't result in a great flag being adopted, they represented the sense of the people of Utah at the time and are a great complement to what's going on and went on in these days with Utah getting a new flag. Thanks, Andrew.
I just wanted to say that I also posted the link for the case study in the chat.
Thank you. I'll be checking it out. Brian.
Well, firstly, I must applaud you, Sarina. That was an amazing presentation, and I was very, very intrigued to see the design process that you went through. A lot of it's quite similar to what we go through in the design forum. When we revise our designs, we end up with quite a lot of options as well. So I have two questions, and the first one is about the difference between a commercial design project and this one. To me, what sticks out is that in a commercial design project, you might have a single client. So that's like a single person or a liaison to get approval. But here there were quite a few groups to consult with and get approval from. You mentioned that led to changes in like the style of the mountains and stars. Do you think that made a key difference to the design process, having multiple different groups and clients rather than just one?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I think when you are working in a commercial state, and a lot of times what would happen during that background process late at night over dinner, you would see the commercial designers saying, well, what if we did 8 stars in this shape? And what if we did 8 stars straight? You know, and so they kind of go down these rabbit holes and they say, well, we don't want to combine these two things in our final 20 because we did over here. But the point is, you're making the one best flag. So if it looks really similar to something else because it's the right choice, we should have explored that more. We're really having so much commercial design background, you know, I think the thinking is get your clients to approve and to like what you see. And you nailed it, Brian, instead of us saying, hey, Utah, I know that this is decision anxiety for you, and I think this is the best design. Now respond to this one thing. And so it's a very different process. And again, it was difficult at times to have so many to parse through yet again, but I just had to keep reminding them, you know, it's about making one. It's the one design that has to be beautiful in the end. That's very representative, and it might hurt your soul a little bit if it doesn't look exactly balanced or perfectly designed, but it's about what people identify themselves with. And so pulling that out is really helpful. I would say if you're working with a lot of commercial designers as opposed to vexillographers, perhaps you just want to remind them before every single exercise for refinement, just say, we're looking for the best representation for our state, nation, whatever it is. And then just kind of put them in the right headspace, because designers are very smart. And I think we picked up the anatomy of a flag and how it works and how it flaps in the wind and understood that really well You cannot shake we've got to make iterations for our clients until you say it's okay. You don't have to do it like that.
Great. Yeah, that's a very nice that's a very nice summary of that process. So my second question is about the case studies. So even without writing up a PDF case study on a website, this presentation that you've given is already quite valuable. You've mentioned that you've talked about some things that haven't been covered before, and that I think would be really helpful for other efforts, other cities, or even states. Usually with these meetings, we only make the video recordings available to members, but would you be happy if we explored the idea of making this one publicly available on our YouTube channel to use as a resource for anyone who wants to see that design process?
I think that sounds great. What would have to happen, because the state of Utah goes through approval processes, if you could send me the recording, I'll make sure that that's okay with our design group. Because again, this is just one piece of really the bigger picture. There's so much going on with the politics, the way we had conversations with the public, with the languages that we've produced, and with the public process. Ted nailed it when he said, the design, although feels really robust, it is a small part of the bigger picture. So I think that sounds great, but let me make sure that it's okay with the rest of my team and the people involved so that we can get approval before we make it public.
No problem. I'll be sure to check that with you. And I'm sorry for springing that on you without
that's
mentioning
okay.
it before. It only just came to me that it might be quite useful for that.
And I'll jump in, and if it is made public, we'll not only have it on our YouTube channel and people on our website will be able to get to it that way, but we'll put it on the case study page. We'll put a link, say, here's not a PDF, but actually a video to go see, and count that as the first installment of your case study.
Perfect. Sounds great. Jim.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up question. Brian kind of got it with his first question with you. So, and Ted, you might want to jump in on this. Like in Burlington, Vermont, the Arts Council were in charge of design, organizing the design for the city flag. And a lot of designs I saw seemed very abstract and kind of the thing you might see in a gallery rather than a flag. And I was wondering, did you kind of have to educate the graphic artists what flags are about, flag design is about, or because it's flag design is different than just look at a piece of art. You know what I'm saying? So I was just wondering if that was dealt with.
Yeah, I will say Ted, being involved from the beginning, was really great teaching us the differences, the things we have to think about with the flag, like with the anatomy of a flag. When it flaps in the wind, that edge becomes a little bit more frayed. And so think about the thickness of your lines there. Ted was great. I will say, though, again, graphic designers are super smart, especially those of us who have been in the field for decades. So once we had those ideas and those principles embodied, we really could run with it and do a great job understanding our limitations and the different things that needed to represent in a very simple design. So I think graphic designers can be given a little bit more credit once they've been educated.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. This has been really fun.
Sarina, I just looked up in Whitney Smith's Flag Book of the United States. It was 1903 when the first design for a Utah state flag was developed. That one that the grandmothers of the current daughters of the Utah pioneers sewed up then. Yeah. And
it's been through iterations too. What's funny is that when we were sitting in a committee hearing, people would be waving or wearing flags who were opposing the new design. But when you looked around the room, everyone's flag that they were wearing or waving was just a little bit different from the next one. And it just kind of strengthened the point. Like, we don't have one solid pass-through flag that is the one Utah flag until now.
And I'll make 2 points. One is that several years ago, our NAVA's past president, John Hartfigson, had noted that the flag that was used for Utah in general use did not actually reflect the original specifications for the state flag. It had to do with where one of the dates was placed in and the color of the seal. And he got the Utah legislature to adopt the specifications to make the flag the way it was originally designed. The second point I want to make, I forgot, so I'm going to go back to you, Sarina.
Okay. Well, I'm finished if there are no more questions. This was really fun. Honestly, you guys, this is the first time I've talked about the design process without feeling anxiety. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sarina. And that gave me a chance to remember what I was going to say. And that is that I predict that within 5 years of the Utah flag's adoption, the new flag's adoption, and having it flying everywhere, the debate and the rancor about changing the flag will have diminished and diluted. And most people will say, oh, yes, that's our flag. Yeah, that's the historic flag. I remember that. It has a place. But this new one is our flag. And it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be on the hats and the T-shirts and the mugs. And people will be flying it on their houses in a way that they wouldn't fly a flag that represents the government. And I predict that in the same way that it happened in Canada and South Africa and some other places, that the controversy will die down and the love for the flag will swell. So that's what you and your staff will get to look forward to, and then look back on and say, we had a role in making that happen.
Very exciting. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Sarina.